Caddis Maximus here. This is just a video comparison discussion of various wire brushes just for anybody who might be curious of some of the more common styles. It's just easier to click on one video to see a bunch of different brushes if you're just kind of curious. Oh, I need some wire brushes. What kind of, I kind of want one like this or like that. So a real common one is these cheap little guys. They're kind of like oversized toothbrushes. You could use them as a toothbrush. They would actually be very effective for plaque. Actually, phenomenally effective. Probably too effective. So I wouldn't recommend them for personal care. But they are very handy for cleaning all sorts of surfaces where you just need a little bit more of an aggressive brushing action than what synthetic or plastic bristles can give you. Of these small type, we have a lot of cheaper ones. The real cheap ones are like this, if we can get it to focus, where it's just a cheap piece of wood. I think they steam bend them and then just poke some holes and jam some wires. There's lots of issues with these types of brushes where the wires pull out. And on cheaper ones, they use less wires, smaller bundles, so they don't hold in quite as tightly. And so when you do a brushing action, it's inevitable what can happen is something like this, where certain pockets of the bristles will get caught and pull out. Now, on some brushes, if you find that that's a big issue, you can there's a couple of tips. I read one from my commenter on one of my previous brush videos, which was to use hot glue. I don't know if they actually meant just to try to put a little hot glue down in the little space in between the folded bristles, because it's just a pack of like 10 wires that's just jammed and folded over, or if they actually meant pull them out, put hot glue in there and try to shove them back in, which would probably work very well, but would be quite labor intensive. Anyway, as far as like brush density and what might make a good brush, would be something like this, where we have a higher quality one, which is actually using multi-layer plywood. There we can see that's 6-layer plywood. This is an actual American-made wire brush. And we can also see, if we compare just how thick, how much wires are in this brush versus this brush, these wires pretty much fill the entire space of the hole. It actually doesn't look like this is folded over. This is more like a real toothbrush where they take a big bundle of wires and they jam them down into the hole that's just a little bit too small. And so that's one of the other things that would set it apart. This is, real high density because they have so much more wires, where this is just a traditional one where they have some wires that are longer and then they fold them over when they push them in. This also exemplifies the other common denominator, which would be smooth bristles or wavy or corrugated bristles. The corrugated bristles, of course, just give you a few more little edges, so it gives just a little bit better or more aggressive of brushing action. And then, of course, the common materials we have are brass, which would be the softest. We have stainless steel, which is a bit more aggressive than brass. It's also very handy if you're doing any kind of surfaces where you're using water, because they won't want to rust. And then what is surprisingly not very common on the small brushes, but is really the standard on bigger brushes, is just regular carbon steel. Now here's a NAPA brand one. NAPA makes some pretty good brushes. They are pretty nice, and I do recommend them. Although wire brushes are the kind of thing where certain situations where you're cleaning up rusty equipment, old lawnmower or something like that, where you're just going to beat up and bend over a bunch of the wires. So all wire brushes don't last forever because the wires do get beat up and bent over, and eventually ends up looking like a well overused toothbrush where all the wires are splayed out and you just have to get another one. So it's nice to kind of get cheap Harbor Freight ones for in situations where you're going to really beat stuff up, and maybe have a nicer one when you're using it to clean up welds or maybe gasket surfaces, something along those lines. And then, of course, down here, they also have these brushes in plastic handles, if that's something that you prefer. We have long handle versions, of course, in stainless steel or carbon steel in the large version, so you can get it just like that. On these larger brushes, I've never seen one that's had the corrugated bristles. I'm sure there is one. I just haven't looked online. Someplace like MSC, McMaster-Carr will probably have one. It's just that the corrugated bristles seem to be kind of more for the smaller brushes than they are for the larger brushes. And then there are, of course, long bristle brushes, such as this one. This one's pretty neat because it's kind of like a really bulky carbon steel wire painter's brush. The long wires kind of give them this a lot of flexibility. So this is able just to get into more convolutions and tighter spaces in the corners, that type of stuff a little bit easier. And this is the type of brush that you would use with that, because obviously these types of brushes and even these only are going to do so well getting into a corner, because the wires are going to fold back and the end of the brush is going to hit. So that's why you need something with long bristles that you can put in, into the corner and an angle and really get at it. So actually a surprisingly handy brush. There are panel brushes that are more common in a lot of stores, which is those barbecue grill cleaning brushes. A lot of them have these interchangeable brush heads like this and like this. They always have stainless steel wires. We have one corrugated here, one non-corrugated. But I like these because they're blocky. They're a little bit lower profile, so they're handy in certain situations. And then being like a block, it's kind of like a crude form of sandpaper, really, where you can just really rough up a surface quite quickly. Or if you're cleaning rust and scale, obviously having a big block brush allows you to work more efficiently because you're covering more area per, cycle. All sorts of ones. You have little narrow ones like this where you can get right down in the tiny crevices and slots. We, of course, have our tube brushes. I've talked a lot about tube brushes, synthetic ones. I've actually reviewed these Harbor Freight ones. Harbor Freight has a few different sets. These are very common. Pretty much any place that sells tools like NAPA or MSC or any of that kind of stuff is going to have all sorts of wire brushes. And like these are, of course, called tube brushes for getting into the cylindrical areas or just really tight spots. They tend to come in various diameters. I just have a couple of 3/4 inch ones for an example here. Those are the Harbor Freights. There's engine brushes, which are like these. These are the Harbor Freight, so they don't have a lot of wires. They're not particularly high quality, but they have this 1/4 inch head sink. So you can use like 1/4 inch drive extensions, so you can use them easily with power tools if you want to. Or in situations where you have these long twisted wire tube brushes, which are really flexible. These are nice because you can use that long 1/4 inch drive extension, and then that makes the handle pretty rigid, so you can reach way down into a space and then actually get an aggressive brushing action that's pretty even. And of course, there's much more professional, higher quality ones. There's kind of oddballs like this, special type of cleaning brushes which have a wide open handle. These I really like just because they're designed just to do like that. You can hold them like this, but like this just really allows you just to use a very aggressive action. It has very stiff, high density bristles. Pretty nice. These are ones that would be traditionally may be used in drills or just by hand, but these are just really short, stubby ones. These are some pretty high quality professional grade ones, so these are super aggressive. And that's something to be aware of because, as the bristles stick out further, they have less rigidity. So diameter plays a part in the aggressiveness of the brush, but also the quality, because a cheap brush of the same diameter as a quality brush will actually have a lighter brushing action because there's just less rigidity, because there's less metal in all the brush wires. Which is actually a handy kind of thing for the cheaper ones, because you can choose brushes, if you're working in a 12 millimeter or 13 millimeter or 1/2 inch hole, trying to clean it out, you can say, well, I want a really aggressive brushing action to start off with, and then a lighter brushing action. All while using actually the same diameter brush and technically doing a better job at it. We have another kind of intermediate length wire brush. This is just like a big scrub brush, just for anything. I wouldn't recommend maybe using it to scrub your car and wash your car. I know, it's ridiculous. But you can imagine somebody out there, maybe their kid, couldn't find a washcloth, found one of these and went ahead and washed their parents' car. You can imagine the expression on the parents' face when they came out and saw that they had washed the car and scrubbed it with a wire brush very thoroughly. Now, this is a brand I really like. This is a very high quality brand. This is the Magnolia brush out of Clarksville, Texas. And they really are nice, really high quality brushes. The unfortunate thing is that they're pretty expensive. Something like this brush is like $10 or something. But they are a brush that you can count on. And if you have one where a bunch of wires just ends up falling out, they actually will send you a new one. It's surprising, but the Magnolia brushes really are a nice premium one. That's a more just a big scrub brush. I just reviewed this Harbor Freight, so these are real common. This thing's 89 cents, super cheap, and it's just nice because it has a bunch of crinkle. They're kind of corrugated but much wider, and it's just a cheap brush that allows you to get in a variety of situations long bristles, a bit of a curve. It's real thin. They tend to get beat up pretty easily. As far as the wires, wanting to pull out, I think that just depends on the situation. I think for most people, you'll end up using this brush until all the wires are splayed off and have fatigued and broken off. Because when the wires pull out, they're not like really just wanting to come right out of this brush. They got to get tangled and you got to yank on it. There's been some comments where the plastic handle wants to pop off of these. And I thought if you have trouble with that, just take a nail, cut it off, ½ inch long, drill a little hole right here, and then a little bit smaller than the piece of the nail you have, and just hammer the nail in there. Drill a little hole and put a little screw right there, and that'll make sure that these type of handles won't ever fall off. And last but not least, just another example. This is actually a steel wire brush, but they're copper coated to help reduce corrosion. You say, why would they do that on a brush? This is actually a ski brush for preparing for waxing your skis. I'm actually not, I love the snow, but I've never actually skied or snowboarded, so not entirely sure. But what I liked is this is like a real high density, almost like a shoe polishing or a boot polishing brush, but a bunch of really, really fine bristles. So this is really nice. Once again, it's surface prep, but it gives you just a less aggressive action than any of these other brushes just because the wires are really fine. And I should show sometime, you can take an air compressor with one of those compressor nozzles, and if you blow right at the roots all along these wire brushes, it'll actually the air will blow out like fibers and stuff. So if you have a bunch of buildup in these brushes, you can use air to blow it out, if it's just particles or fibers. Obviously, if it's hardened grease, air is not going to blow it out. So anyway, that was a video of a bunch of different wire brushes just so people have a bit more knowledge about them, and there actually is a world. This is a very small example. There really is a whole world of brushes. It's really surprising. Once you really get into tools, you can pick any specific category and then dive right into that category and find huge variety. Kind of like artwork. Because it is a form of art. It's industrial art. It's tool art. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed to the Catus Maximus channel, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.